I was born in Windsor Hospital, New South Wales. I have an older brother, he's 3 years older than me. I actually don't have too many childhood memories. When I was a kid, I used to want to be a vet until one day I was loading my horse onto a truck, and we were going to a gymkhana, and my horse's leg slipped between the truck and the loading dock, and as he pulled it back up, he's hit the corner of the truck and all his skin had just ripped down. There was blood everywhere, and I just remember crying, and that changed me. I didn't want to be a vet anymore. I couldn't deal with all the blood, and I was like, ah. Yeah, so a vet up until that happened, and then I guess I didn't really know. I still don't really know, I guess. When I was younger, because my dad was quite abusive, we moved around a lot. So we never really stayed in a place long enough for us to remember or get to know people. Like I changed schools every single year up until year 5. There was no stability. Mum hadn't spoken to her family in years. We didn't speak to Dad's family. So it was just me, my brother and my mum. Moving a lot, it was not so bad on me because I make friends easily, but it was also hard because, you know, people would talk about friends that they've had since preschool and stuff, and, you know, like I was never able to keep the same friends because we moved really, like, you know, to very different areas. It's not like we just moved in the same town, we moved whole town. So, you know, like I didn't have any stable childhood friends. I just had lots of different friends. I craved just to have that friend that I could say I've had for years, or that I could be open and honest with and stuff, but I never got a chance to bond long enough for that. I was always a really smart kid, so school was pretty easy for me. It was difficult in changing schools, and it was difficult, you know, different teachers and as I said before, friends. But, you know, I never struggled at school until high school. But, yeah, I think it was more just not having stability that was hard. I was born into quite an unhealthy family. My dad was very abusive to my mum and my brother, but never to me. He was always really good to me. My dad's violence definitely scared me. Like, I never felt scared for myself, but I often felt scared for mum and my brother. I do remember once he was yelling so badly at mum, and I found a cardboard box, and I remember hiding in that box until it was over. But I also remember many times, like, if Dad would be yelling at mum, I could walk into the room and he would stop and pick me up and hug me. So I guess that sort of developed this rescuer part in me that, you know, I knew I could save mum. But there was other things that were really scary, like Dad coming home one day, and as soon as he walked in the door, my mum jumped out a glass window because she was that scared of him. And, you know, then we had to go to emergency because she'd slashed her foot open, and like things like that was scary. For me, it was a different type of scary though, because I knew he would never hurt me. I knew I was safe, but it was just scared for what was going to happen for them. By age 7, we had completely moved out, and then we moved up to Queensland, and he died not long after we got to Queensland. I was also a daddy's girl, so it was really hard for me because I always felt that my mum and my brother had this really strong connection, and me and my dad did. Even though I didn't see him often, that was my person, my safe person. And I guess when he died, I just felt like my mum and my brother had this beautiful bond together, and then there was me on the outside. And because my dad's family's Japanese and my brother's the firstborn grandson, you know, they were all giving him all the attention and love. I just sort of felt like an outsider that meant nothing. In Japanese culture, you know, the firstborn grandson is everything, and yeah, I don't know, I was lost. I felt lost for many, many, many years. For probably a year before he died, we'd both been getting sexually abused by my mum's partner at that time. neither of us knew about the other one, neither of us told anybody, but after Dad died, I found out that my brother had actually told my dad. And so I guess, you know, like there was always me knowing that Dad would come and rescue me one day, but then he's dead, so he can't. And my brother actually told him, so I guess my brother was relying on him fixing it. And yeah, my dad dying, it really shattered both of us in very different ways. My dad wasn't a good man, but he was good to me, and I knew that if he had found out what was happening to me, he would have definitely rescued me. And even though I didn't tell him, I guess there was a part of me that was still hoping for that rescue. And once he died, like, I just knew that there was no saving me from what was going to happen. And yeah, so my abuser moved to Queensland as well. And I guess a part of me I definitely wanted it to stop. All of me wanted it to stop, but I was too scared to tell Mum because I knew that she would hurt herself. So I ended up telling my best friend because she was being abused as well, who ended up telling Mum. And of course, what I thought would happen did. My mum slit her wrists, and I guess she just felt like she'd failed as a mother. But I guess at least it stopped then. When it did come out, I was 12, and I had to go through the whole ordeal of police interviews and sort of reliving it, because I guess because I'd been safe for about 6 months at that stage. It was just me and my mum and my brother living together. Going through and talking to it about with the police sort of made me relive it all, which was really difficult, probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as an adult now, I'm grateful that it came out, but back then when I was a kid, it was really difficult, because I think I felt betrayed by my best friend. I felt like my mum's, you know, I'm going to lose my mum. Like, yeah, it was difficult. When I got interviewed by the police, the one thing that they kept telling me in that interview is, this isn't your fault, you're not in trouble. And I already knew that. Like, I know I hear a lot about abused people, they either don't remember it, which is funny because I don't remember a lot in my life, but I clearly remember my abuse and all of my abuse. But I never felt guilty, I never felt wrong. I knew that it wasn't my fault, but I felt shame. I felt disgusting. Why it was happening, I knew it was wrong. Like, I tried to disassociate. Like, I remember one of the first times it was happening, and I'll never forget the room, and all I did was look out the window and like took myself out of that room. I knew it wasn't my fault, which is a good thing. And I think I was forced to get counselling around it once it all came out. And, you know, like, I think that was the one thing they kept saying over and over is it's not your fault. And I never ever did believe that it was. You know, I definitely didn't encourage it or anything. And they asked me why I never told my mum. I didn't think she wouldn't believe me. I knew she would believe me. It had happened to her, but I think it was just more, I guess, the emotional stability. And yeah, like, my mum and my brother were all I had. So, you know, if I lost her emotionally, what did I have? A brother that's 3 years older than me. You know, we didn't have extended family or anyone else we could rely on. It was just the three of us. So I guess I kept that to myself, knowing that, you know, it would change everything for us. So when I was in Year 5, I moved out to Crow's Nest, and everybody in Crow's Nest has lived in Crow's Nest their whole life. Their parents have lived in Crow's Nest their whole life. Their grandparents have. We were outcasts immediately because we hadn't grown up there and we weren't farmers. So at the start, it was really hard to make friends. You know, everyone was very cliquey with each other. I struggled with connection, and I guess because, you know, in my earlier schooling years, I never was able to make connections and keep them because we moved around so much. And even though I knew that we weren't moving, I guess, you know, it was instilled in me that you can't get close to people because they'll be gone anyway. And yeah, and then it was also hard because of people, you know, not allowing you in. I would go through the motions of doing school. I was good at schoolwork. My attention span wasn't that great, but yeah, I guess I just lived each day to go home to my animals. When I was about 12, I came home with a horse and I said to Mum that we're keeping it, and he was my escape from reality. So I got him not long after I'd been sexually abused, and so you know, I had a really strong connection with him, and he was my little escape from home, I guess. And yeah, like, you know, he taught me that unconditional love and, you know, a little bit of responsibility. And yeah, my mum wasn't thrilled when I came home with that horse, but she also obviously had a lot of guilt because it wasn't long before I got him that she'd found out about me being sexually abused by her partner. So yes, she didn't say no. I joined the local pony club when I was 12, and yeah, so I just loved being on the horse. It was freedom. Yeah. You know, we had every other animal as well. We had ducks and geese and goats and turkeys and dogs and cats. So, you know, and animals still to this day play a big part in my life. And I think that's why, because it was my first encounter with safety and having a good, proper life. So year 11 and 12, I went to boarding school. I was a weekly boarder. I'd just go home on weekends and board at the school. Boarding school for me was not good. A lot of the girls in boarding school had been there since grade 8 and they're full-time boarders. I was a weekly boarder that only came in year 11. So the girls there too are very cliquey. There's emotions of girls and, you know, that time of month and stuff. So that was difficult. You know, I guess yet again I was an outcast because I got to go home every weekend and see my family, and, you know, those other girls only got to go home 4 times a year. And yeah, they already all had connections with each other, being that they'd been there since year 8 and I was only there for the last 2 years. And I think because of that, my schoolwork really, really slipped in year 11 and 12. Like, I always had been, you know, A's and B's, or, you know, distinctions, high distinctions. 11 and 12, I started skipping classes. Like, I'd go downtown. I just wouldn't do assignments. And yeah, like a lot of classes in year 11 and 12, I barely passed. I think I must have rebelled a bit. I guess I acted out a little bit from what had happened to me as a child. Like, subconsciously, of course, I didn't know any of this was going on. I think it started when I was in year 10. You know, I would ask Mum if I could go out somewhere. If she'd say no, I'd just shove pillows in the bed and then go out the window and go anyway. I didn't touch drugs at all when I was a teenager, but I started drinking, and yeah, and then I guess boys was my problem. Like, I just had that need to be loved, and so I would try and fulfill that need in boys, and I had boyfriends from year 11. I had him for 2 years, straight to another one the next day. And I guess you know, that was the one thing that I always had was a boyfriend, just to try and fill that need to be loved, which never really got filled. At my year 12 formal, I broke up with my boyfriend that I'd been with for 2 years and started going out with another guy that night at my formal, and I pretty much moved in with him straight away, like within a month. I'm grateful for that experience. Like, I still love his family to bits. I still talk to them a lot because I'd never seen a family operate and still live together, and they all just loved each other, and I'd never experienced that. So it was really nice just to live for a few years in such a loving family. And I guess, yeah, that's what I was always like, this is what I want for my family. I was always really distant with Mum. Well, I felt distant from Mum as, a child, and then, because I became such a rebellious teenager, my mum really struggled with that, and we both have very strong personalities, and we fought a lot, and living with her was really toxic. So when I moved in with Carl and his family, I just stopped talking to her altogether. So I just didn't talk to her at all for 3 years. I guess there was a part of me that did start blaming her for my life and how things were, and why didn't we have this perfect family, and there was a part of me that was really bitter at her for everything. It wasn't until I'd experienced the ups and downs of life for myself that I realised that she did the best that she could. She was just trying to make it in a pretty rough world as well, and she didn't have a great upbringing either. I think, how do you know how to raise a family when that's how you've been raised? So I guess it was when I was 21 that I actually had this realisation, and that I decided to start talking to her again. And yeah, I drove up there and we just talked for hours. We both cried, and she said her sorries, I said sorries, and yeah, we've never stopped talking again since. I was always a big party goer. I used to try and get into nightclubs when I was underage, and a couple of times I did, but I never did drugs, and I didn't even know everyone around me was on drugs until I think I was 19, and it was New Year's Eve in Sydney, and I was just with a few friends, and they were on ecstasy tablets, and they asked me if I wanted one, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I had half a one, and I had the greatest night, I thought, and just danced and talked to everyone, and I was friendly, and that turned into just, weekend party drugs for many years. It never cut into work or anything. It was always just a weekend thing and a bit of fun partying and stuff. In that time I partied, I met, we used to party together and, go out dancing and whatnot. He used to work away, so, while he was away, I would start using more and more, and I started using ice. It was only just with girlfriends at home. I wasn't going out or doing anything like that. If anything, it made me more antisocial. And every time we'd fight, I would go and use again. But it still wasn't all day, every day. We broke up for a little while, and then I stopped altogether. We moved away. Within 3 months, I was pregnant with Zali. So I had Zali when I was 29. I was clean and sober. Then I fell pregnant with Alira about 6 months later, and my partner and I bought a house up in the Sunshine Coast. So I was basically pregnant, breastfeeding, so 2 kids under 2, my partner working away for 6 weeks at a time. I had no family or any support up there, so it was pretty difficult. I feel like I had some postnatal depression. I really struggled a bit, and I guess it brought up a lot of insecurities in me, like that my partner was working away so much, and I started feeling like I wasn't loved by him. He would get home and give the kids a lot of attention, which is understandable because they were so young and changing so much every time he'd come home. But I guess that brought up a lot of my insecurities and feeling unloved. I would break up with him, and that was a cycle that at the time I didn't see, but I see it now. I'd done it in every relationship I'd ever had. I'd break up with them so that they would chase me. Then that would feel that need, oh, they do love me. I broke up with my partner and he didn't chase me back. And I think that started a whole downward spiral for me because You know, I had ideas in my head about having this, you know, beautiful family like my ex's family, that, you know, we were going to, mum and dad and the kids and the house, and we had it all, and then all of a sudden I didn't have that anymore. So when my partner and I first split, I had the kids. I lent my car to a friend one night who wrote the car off, and because the car was registered in my partner's name, the police had called him in the middle of the night, and he thought that we were in an accident and he flew home straight away. I was actually asleep at a friend's house with the kids, and, you know, so I'd missed all these calls all night, and then woke up in the morning and he was at home, and then he wanted to know the kids were all right, obviously. So he took the kids, and then I was supposed to pick the kids up a week later. I just went on a big bender. And the house that I was staying at got raided. Both the people living there got locked up, so I felt that I needed to stay at the house so that they didn't get everything stolen. So I missed that date where I was supposed to pick up the kids. Instead of trying to get them back or fight for them, I just turned to ice and just tried to numb it, and yeah. That would be what I would consider the pivotal point of me, you know, using drugs for fun to just completely trying to numb out. Yeah, I didn't want to feel anything. If I would think about the kids or everything that I'd lost or thrown away, I would cry so much that I'd be like uncontrollably crying, and, you know, so then I would, you know, inject ice just to be completely numb and feel nothing. You know, at the start that worked for a long time, but yeah, over time that didn't help either. Some people think they can function on ice. I definitely couldn't, but that's why I took it. I just didn't care about anything. I couldn't meet appointments. I couldn't do anything, go anywhere, but that's kind of what I wanted at that time. I just wanted an escape from reality because I hated my reality. I hated feeling, and it just completely made me numb. But what I didn't realise at the time, I was numb to the bad things that were happening, but I was also numb to the good things and the people that loved me. Like, I really hurt a lot of my best friends because, you know, they would try and help me or just want to talk to me, and I would just block them out. I wouldn't talk to them, and it wasn't that I didn't love them, because I did. I just didn't. I guess I didn't feel worthy, but I was just so desensitized to anything, like even love. In the end, because of my addiction, I lost everything. I lost, you know, my family, I lost my kids. If I didn't slide into addiction, there's a chance back then I could have fixed that. But I didn't. I just numbed it, and I never changed anything. I didn't. You know, he'd said to me, you just need to stop using and you can see the kids. I didn't believe that, and so I didn't even try. You know, it just seemed easier at the time just to continue taking these drugs, which made me not feel, because that's where I felt okay, is by not feeling. My mum, I would see occasionally, but I was mean, I was nasty, and, you know, if things weren't going my way, I would just lash out at everyone around me. It must have been hard for everyone else. Like, it was easy for me because I was on drugs, I didn't care. But for everybody else, looking back now, like, it must have been awful for them. I didn't even speak to my kids, maybe once or twice a year, and, you know, they didn't understand why. In my head, it was poor me, like, why is this happening to me? It's not until after I got clean that I realised if I had done that sooner, you know, I could have sorted things out. But during my addiction, I didn't see any of it. I don't think I wanted to see. I think I was comfortable in the numbing. Once I started using the needle, things for me spiraled out of control very, very, very quickly. I guess I probably was only using for about 6 months when, you know, that not even that helped anymore. Instead of numbing, I started losing my mind. just thinking people were after me, everyone was out to get me, everything was a big conspiracy, and even friends that cared for me, I used to think were trying to get me in some way. And I convinced myself one time that the kids must be dead because that's the only reason that I wouldn't be seeing them. I even went to the police station about that, and I hated police at the time. And I'm like, I just want to know they're okay. So I just kept thinking things were happening that weren't. I thought I was being followed all the time. I was paranoid about police. I was paranoid that my partner was out to get me. I thought my mum was against me, who would never be. The funny thing about it all is that I didn't completely believe it all, but I couldn't work out what was real and what wasn't. I thought another ex-boyfriend was out to get me, and I didn't know the difference between reality and what my head was creating. I knew that my head was creating stuff. I didn't fully believe everything, but what parts I didn't know and I couldn't tell. And despite that, I just still kept using, and I don't understand that. I guess that's addiction though, but even though this stuff was making me utterly crazy, I would still keep using. That was really an everyday struggle. I felt so confused all the time. My brain didn't stop. It was a combination of overthinking and trying to process that overthinking and work out if it's real or if it's not. Then it was sifting through and trying to find facts to match up with what my head's saying, I always thought I was being filmed for some reason. I always, even in the shower, I remember hiding in the shower in private because I always felt watched. In the end, I just had to let go of it all, whether it was real or not real, or whether people did this to me or they didn't. I just had to let it go, and it didn't matter anymore. So I guess the only experiences as a child I had with police is when they would come in and raid our house, and me and my brother would be sleeping. So I always had a negative thing towards police. I guess they invaded our safe place when I was a kid. And it wasn't long of me being in the drug scene that I got charged. And I remember the warning from the police back then. They told me, if you keep hanging out with people like this, you're going to find yourself in more and more trouble. And I remember thinking, whatever. I just kept finding myself in more and more trouble. And then I built up this bitterness towards police. Police, obviously, are just doing their job, but I was an ice addict and they don't like ice addicts, which is understandable. In Toowoomba, it's not a big place. They knew me by name. I got charged a lot, obviously. That happens when you're selling drugs or you're driving around, the middle of the night. I got my fair share of warnings, and, it is true what they say, who you hang around plays a big part in, what happens, because, it was only probably a year after I started getting into the thick of it. I'm driving around in stolen cars, and it's just things that I never would have done without drugs. I let myself be involved in a lot of stuff that I wouldn't normally. I have a pretty bad criminal record now because of it. Taking charges that weren't mine, I would take them because it meant they didn't go to jail. But it's funny how quickly, and I've seen it since, young people that come into the scene, and very quickly you just build up that rap sheet and, you just get sucked into it all. I got very, very, very close to jail. I've gotten a couple of suspended sentences with immediate release. So, that's given a jail sentence, but released straight away. If you get in trouble in, however long your sentence is for, then I would have gone in. My last one being just before I got to Destiny, I got 2 years. So if I had have not come to Destiny and been out in the world, I think I definitely would have been in jail, because it's nearly impossible to live in that scene and not get in trouble for 2 years. For me to be able to feed my habit, I guess I needed to sell drugs. Not enough to make big dollars or anything, but just enough to feed my habit and, you know, just get by. Once I became a user, I started going out with drug dealers. I was in a very, very abusive relationship, well, two very abusive relationships. One where he took me hostage by gunpoint and, you know, pretty much forced me to stay with him. Another one where I got stabbed by a screwdriver. And I guess that's all I thought I was worth at the time. Like, I thought I stayed with them because I didn't think I deserved any better. I knew I was a junkie and I didn't care. I had this longing to be loved by others, but I had no love for myself. I didn't even care that the rest of the world knew I was a junkie either. I think a part of me thought that if, you know, I thought the worst of myself, then I could never let anyone else's thoughts of me get to me, because I already thought so little of myself, and that was sort of my coping mechanism. If I just looked at myself as little as possible and, you know, as negative as possible, then wouldn't matter what anyone else thought. Couldn't be worse than that. I didn't see a future. I never thought I could get my kids back. I honestly thought I would either end up dead or in jail. So my dad died when he was around the same age as what I was when I was in addiction, and I remember sending a message to my brother saying that I'm going to end up exactly the same as Dad, because he died of an overdose as well. That's all I seen for me, was either death or jail, and if I went to jail I'd probably die anyway. So the first overdose that I had, it wasn't intentional. I didn't mean to fully overdose. I had enough of the world. I wanted all my pain to go away, and I took liquid fantasy, and I just took a mouthful of it. I didn't really know much about it, but I actually, my heart fully stopped. But yeah, that wasn't intentional. I didn't mean to kill myself. But the second time, it was when the father of my kids and I broke up, and I took a handful of pills. That at that time I wanted to die. I didn't care, but you know, I got taken to hospital, and I don't remember any of that, but I remember the feelings around the time of both of them, and it was just, I can't handle this anymore. I can't do life anymore. So while I was using, I pushed friends and family away. I pushed my brother to a point where he would not speak to me at all, you know, because when I was using, when my paranoia would get too much, I would go to my brother's house because I knew it was a safe place, and you know, he used to cook me dinner, like I'd have a shower, eat, and then go to sleep for a few days, then I'd wake up and do it all again. So I guess, you know, after a couple of years of doing that, he just had enough. He stopped talking to me. My mum was always there, but I guess I just pushed her away, you know, pretty badly as well. I wasn't talking to my closest best friends because I just didn't feel worthy. I didn't even believe that I was an addict until it was actually my dealer said to me that I was addicted. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I can go without it. And he's like, all right, you go 2 weeks without it. And I'm like, fine, then I will. I didn't make the afternoon out, and that's when I actually first sat with the thought that, wow, I'm actually an addict. I can't live without this stuff. So it's not something that you just know. Like, I guess it's something that I don't even know how long I was an addict for before that pivotal moment, or that, you know, that moment I realised. But it wasn't until it was pointed out to me that I actually accepted that I was. And I think we're so good at deceiving ourselves too. I convinced myself that I wasn't that, the only reason I was using is because I don't have my kids, and if I got my kids back, I would just stop. It would be that easy. And I stuck with that story for years and years, and because I had charges and stuff, I couldn't fight for the kids anyway. And then I think about 3 years after I lost them, I'd gotten all my charges cleared. I had nothing over my head or anything, like no court or anything. And at that point, I could have started fighting for the kids, and instead that afternoon I used, and that's the afternoon I rang Destiny Haven, because I realised that I can't live without that stuff. And, every excuse that I ever made was just that, an excuse. Like, I actually had a problem, and it wasn't just that my kids were gone. Like, I couldn't do life without this stuff, and I couldn't do life with it either. So yeah, I needed help, and I'll never forget the call to Julia. It was the first call. I hadn't filled out an application form or anything, and we talked for an hour and a half. I'd just used, so I had plenty to say, and yeah, she said, "You sound like a perfect fit for Destiny," and told me to fill out the application form. She sent it to me. From that time, it took me, I think, another 6 months to actually get the application form in. One try, I think I got half of the pages, and then it took another 3 months to get the rest in. But of course, by that time, living in that world, I had charges again, so I still couldn't come because all my charges were in Queensland, and you can't move state with charges over your head. So the whole process of me first calling Destiny and actually getting here took 2 years. So with all the paranoia that was going on, and not knowing what was real and what was not, I knew that I needed help. So I did do, after I got stabbed by an ex, I did a 4-day detox, and but he was in jail at the time, and I felt like I couldn't do rehab because I needed to get him out. So I, after 4 days, checked out a detox, and then, I think I did another year out there. I still knew I needed help. I knew I couldn't stop by myself. I was so over living in a world where I didn't know what was real and what wasn't, and who was my friends and who wasn't. And so much of my time as a user, I thought my kids would be better off without me, which is why I sort of continued. But there was that part of me that just couldn't give up being a mum. So I Googled rehabs near Singleton, because that's where they were living at the time. So Destiny Haven was the first one that came up on my Google search. So the first time I called, I had pending charges, and Destiny Haven said that they couldn't accept me until I got those charges cleared. So I guess, in my head, I thought, I've tried, I've done what I can, and I didn't bother trying anywhere else until I got my charges cleared, which is when I again used. So then I called Julia, and we had that very long conversation. To be honest, I used right up until the day I went into detox. I slept the 4 days I was in detox. I got to Destiny, and I don't really remember what I was thinking. I know I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to sleep for 10 years. Yeah, on the trip here, I think I slept most of it. I had no expectations. I got here, and I remember Julia greeting me with a hug outside, and I just burst into tears. I guess it still really hadn't sunk in what I was getting myself in for, or what I was doing. I guess to a degree I was still numb. It was 4 days after I'd used, but I still hadn't really felt emotion yet, and it was just, it probably wasn't until, a few days after being here that I sort of realised, my life is just changed altogether, and I didn't know what to think, to be honest. I didn't really put a lot of thought into coming to rehab. I just knew that it was the only way that I was going to be able to see the kids again. I'd been told, go to rehab and you'll see your kids. And it was definitely a God thing that Destiny Haven was the top one, and that I didn't bother trying anything else. I think it's by far not the biggest rehab around, but yet it was the first on my Google search. And I, at the time, being so unhealthy, in my opinion, I tried, and because I couldn't get into this one, I wasn't going to try any others. But there was a reason for that, and I think I was always meant to come here, but I never actually thought about what rehab would mean. I never even thought about how long it was. When I got told on the phone that it's a minimum of 12 months, I guess my first thoughts were, I don't have 12 months to waste, but yet I'd just done 4 years using ice every day. So I guess I thought to, all right, well, we'll just be here just for the 12 months and then that's it. I'll go out and get my kids. And, I was so set on that for the whole time, because I never wanted to do rehab for me. I wanted to do it simply to get my kids back. But then, I would have been here, really close to the 12 months when a big shift in me happened, and all of a sudden it wasn't just about the kids. It was like, I want to be the best version of me that I can be. Yes, for the kids, but also for me, because unless I become the best version of me, I'm not going to be the best mum. And, it does impact the kids, but, that's where I went from that shift of, I'm only here for 12 months and I'm leaving on the day, till I'm just letting the process happen and I'll be here till I don't need to be. So from the moment I got here, I felt safe, which is something I hadn't felt in a long time. I'd battled so many demons in my head of, people after me, or, just really unhealthy thinking. I got here and I think, Julia's first embrace was just almost like, you're safe, it's okay. And then everyone here was just so nice, and it had been a long time since I'd been around people that were genuinely nice without wanting something from you. I was a little bit uncomfortable with, why are these people being so nice? And it took a few weeks to realise it's just because it's a safe place, and it's such a loving family environment. And I took to it very quickly because I love being loved. That's the one thing that I've always longed for. And it was just, it was really nice. So when I first got to Destiny, I loved the work duties. I loved being physically working. I loved the whole program. I loved that we spent a lot of time outdoors, because I've always been an outdoors person, other than when I was using. I learned a lot of things. Like I never was a gardener, and I took to the garden. I think my buddy at the time was in charge of the garden, so I liked being outside with her. And then I loved, actually producing things like strawberries and tomatoes and stuff. I'd never actually grown anything that had, fruit before. And so that was really exciting. Very early on, I had a few issues, because I didn't trust people, and I was still very standoffish, and I didn't like being told what to do. So I did struggle a little bit being the new person. I felt like an outcast. I never was, but I'd always come from that place of being the outcast. So I guess I just automatically put myself in that place. So it took me a while to feel like I fit in. When I say a while, it happened within a month or so, and so I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's only a short time. I remember after about 3 months here, deciding I had a little altercation with someone in the garden, and I stormed into the office and I'm like, call my nan, I want to go home. And I got told to journal about it. I'm like, I don't want to journal, I want to go home. And so I started frantically packing all my bags, and I'd accumulated a lot of stuff from donations that we get here, and so I've packed all the bags that I had here. Then I looked in my cupboard and it was still half full, and I'm like, how can I go home? I don't have enough bags for this. Janine came in and talked to me, and we were able to talk through what the problem was, and I ended up staying. And now I can look back and laugh at that moment at, you know, how much of me just wanted to run, and because that was my safe thing to do. Things get tough, I would run, and I'd always done that. And I think, you know, that very first time that I tried to do that and didn't, it was a real win for me, like to not actually run from a problem, to sit there and work through it and know that you can work through things. You don't have to just keep running. So the staff at Destiny Haven are what made me stay. You know, that's the unconditional love that they offer, you know. And then I found out that no one here gets paid, so they're actually doing it because they love people and they want to see lives change. You know, other government funded programs don't need to love people as much because they're getting paid regardless, whereas, you know, I think at Destiny that's what the difference is. You know, they want to be here, they want to see lives change, they're doing it for nothing. I'd only ever known correction in floggings or, you know, like groundings or, you know, really harsh penalties, whereas here it's correction in love. And I think that makes you want to do better and be better, like, because you're not living in fear. You just know anytime that you're getting corrected, it's because they want to see a better version of you, and obviously that's what I wanted to be, a better version of me. So yes, I used to get called into the office, and my first reaction was always tense, and, you know, I've got to be defensive because otherwise I'm going to get flogged. But, you know, after going in there and that not happening, it took a while. Like, it would have been over 6 months of getting called into the office to understand that I'm not going to get yelled at or I'm not going to get hit. You know, they just want the best for me, and they want me to be the best version of me that I can be. So we do like different therapies. So there's art therapy, there's we run different groups together, and then self-direct as well as work duties. Once we were doing all those things, the weeks just sort of flew past. Like the first week was probably my longest, but then after that the weeks just started rolling past, and yeah, the longer that I was here, the quicker the weeks sort of went. Like, you know, it would be a weekend before I would know it. And you know, so I've gone from thinking, how can I do 12 months to, I actually did 16 months in program, and really looking back, it went really quickly. Doing Janine's Understanding Trauma group, I think, was really life-changing. I never knew when I was being triggered until I did the body sensations, and I was like, oh, I'm clenched, I'm tight, you know, I feel fuzzy, or, you know, understanding all those sensations made me realize I was triggered. Then I could work out what triggered me. I guess before I understood that, I never knew how I was feeling. I never understood, you know, that my body holds so many memories of trauma, and just understanding how my body is processing my emotions was probably the most helpful thing. And so that, you know, I could counteract that. But Janine's Understanding Trauma group will forever and still changes my life. I've done that group now 3 separate times, and if she ran it again, I would do it again. Like, it's one of those groups that, you know, she's gone into every aspect of, you know, your body and emotions and internal family systems. I think understanding internal family systems was life-changing for me as well, because I never used to understand why I could have a fight inside my head until I understood they're separate parts of me. I just thought, you know, I wasn't all there or something, but it's, you know, it's just 2 different parts of me disagreeing. So I think that made me feel like I wasn't crazy anymore. In self-direct, which is you get given a module to work through, I found a few of those life-changingly helpful. You know, boundaries. When I first got the boundaries book, I'm like, what are boundaries? So it was very evident that I needed that book, and I just didn't know that, you know, what boundaries were. I'd never had them, or, you know, I'd never had any of my own. So, you know, that was life-changing. Look, if I was to write down all the things that I learned at Destiny Haven, I would write forever, I think. But one of the most, I think, life-changing things that I did here at Destiny is learn that I need to forgive. I went through the journey of forgiving my childhood abuser, who I'll never forget. When I first spoke about him in counselling, I went in there and I'm like, I wish he was dead. And then, you know, there was all that, I don't want to forgive him, he doesn't deserve forgiveness. And, you know, I worked on that for probably a year and a half. But when I got to that moment of actually genuinely forgiving him, I'll never forget that feeling, that it was freeing and empowering. And I guess I learned the power of forgiveness through that experience. And just, I didn't realise what unforgiveness was doing for me. Like, it wasn't doing anything for him, but it was holding me. It was drinking poison, hoping he would die. As well as just loving myself, I think looking at, you know, myself different. Like, I never felt worthy and I never felt good enough. And being at Destiny Haven, I learned that I am enough. I used to prove my worth by doing things for people. Like, you know, I would always help people do something because that's how I felt needed and worthy. But at Destiny, I was loved even if I wasn't doing anything. You know, that the bits of me that I always tried to hide were loved. And I think that changed everything for me. Like, you know, when your ugliest bits are loved, it changes how you see and feel about yourself. Love before Destiny is something that I needed, and I got from anywhere that I could, and I didn't care where I got it from. I still just as much need love, but, you know, I know that I'm loved. So it's not that I need to go out and find love. I just know that I'm loved. You know, God loves me, that my Destiny family love me, my family love me, and I love me. So it's, you know, instead of trying to fill that need of being loved by relationships, it's now just knowing who I am and you know, loving that person and accepting that I am loved. It changes everything for life, I guess. I was here 5 months before I went home for Christmas, and I first seen my brother, and I was quite anxious about that because we were so close. For him, like, to just not speak to me, it gutted me. You know, all I ever had was my mum and my brother. So that first Christmas, I remember going home and seeing him, and I just cried, like, you know, that he would speak to me again. The biggest restoration for me, though, was my kids, getting my kids back. So in those like 3 years or 4 years that I was using, I probably spoke to them a handful of times. So when I went home 2018 Christmas, my ex let me actually have the girls for the first time in 4 years. I had both the girls for 4 weeks of my holidays, and it was amazing. We were able to restore that bond, and now, like, you never would have known that I was just an absent mother for 4 years. I think the restoration that's happened there is just definitely from God. I love these little girls, and I watch them grow into just these beautiful, well-mannered little girls. And, you know, like, I just stare at them someday, and, you know, I still, a part of me thinks I don't deserve them, but I'm so blessed, you know, that I've got them, and that, you know, we're able to have such a beautiful relationship. They don't hold any of it against me, which is amazing. Like, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's amazing. I've gone from having, you know, them not being in my life at all to, throughout my program, every weekend that I had out, I would have them, to when I went home for Christmas, having them for that Christmas break. And then when I became intern, having them every second weekend. And now as staff, I still have them every second weekend, as well as half of the holidays. And, you know, all the time that we share together is amazing. Like, we just have a really great, close relationship. So I knew about God. I knew God existed. When I was probably in my teens, I used to go to a youth group just more so for something to do, because we lived in a town there wasn't much to do. And I remember asking Jesus into my life way back then, but I never had a relationship with God at all. I remember when I was really unhealthy, just crying, just bawling, and I'm like, just please help me, God. And you know, at that time, the help that I wanted was for him to take my life, but he helped me in a much greater way than that. But yeah, like, and I also know all through my life, when things were either really good or really bad, I would always be like, thank you, God, or help me, God. But, you know, I certainly didn't live like a Christian. Coming to Destiny and realizing, you know, how much God loves me, and, you know, that I can have a relationship with him because of Jesus, I think that changed a lot for me. And then I reflected over my life, and I guess I could see God's hand over so many parts of my life. You know, there were so many things that I either should have been put in jail for or dead. You know, I've had car accidents and things like that, you know, I shouldn't have survived, but I did. And, you know, the fact that I didn't go to jail, or, you know, I tried to overdose a few times, and, you know, that I have life, the fact that I was brought here, I can see God's hand all over that. Like I said, when I Googled rehabs, Destiny was the first one that come up. Like, what are the odds of that happening? Destiny isn't a huge rehab. It's just, for it to be first on Google, it has to be a God thing. My relationship with God is what's healed me inside out, you know, like that, knowing that I'm loved, knowing that I was created for a purpose. I think that was my biggest thing, because I'd never felt like I had a purpose. And then to know that I was actually created for a purpose changed things for me. Like, we've all got a purpose. You know, we're not just mishaps. He doesn't just make mistakes. So, yeah, just understanding that, and that I'm loved unconditionally, you know, even though all the stuff ups I've made or will make, or just knowing that I'm still loved regardless, changed everything for me. I have hope now. Like, I don't know what my future looks like, but I know it's amazing. I know that, you know, all of this is preparation for something amazing. And you know, I didn't have hope before. I didn't care if I saw the next day or not. But now it's exciting. I don't know what's in store for me, but that's exciting too. It's a journey, and, you know, I've loved every part of the journey. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it, and good things have come out of even the hardest stuff. So it's exciting. My internal world is very different. Why I still create little scenarios sometimes, or overthink, it's definitely not to an unhealthy level. And it's very safe. You know, I don't think anyone's after me anymore. I'm not constantly worried or anxious. I know what's real and what's not. When I do start overthinking, I know I'm overthinking, and then I can go to someone and, you know, ask for help with my thoughts. So that's very different, because I never would reach out for help before, because I used to think that I would sound even crazier, and, you know, if no one else knew what was going on in my head, it was okay. Whereas now I know I've got safe people around me who can help me process what's going on. That makes my internal world a lot happier. My first Christmas holidays, I didn't do any journals. I had a holiday. So I restarted program when I got back. And so, yeah, I was in program for 16 months. So when I was asked to stay on as intern, I saw that as, you know, another opportunity to keep growing and being in a safe place. So, yeah, I did my 12-month internship. Where I was out every second weekend, and I was able to have my kids every second weekend. And then after my 12-month internship, they asked me to stay on as staff, and yeah, I decided to do that. you know, there's work that I can do on myself, and you know, I love now that I have that opportunity to help other people do the same journey. I absolutely love, you know, watching girls that come in that are broken just like I was, and you know, watching their journey to wellness. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that, you know, not only have I got to do for myself, but you know, I can take part in other girls going through that journey. When I started internship, I also started a Cert 4 in mental health. I hadn't studied since school, so I finished school in 2000. So it was 19 years of not studying at all. Yeah, and it felt good at first. You know, I was really anxious, and then I handed in my first assignment, and you know, I was so surprised when, you know, I passed. And you know, I was like, I messaged everyone going, oh my gosh, I passed, but you know, no one else was surprised. It was just me. So it feels good to actually be proactive and doing things again, you know, that I never thought that I could or would. Like, I never believed in myself enough to even try. I am most grateful for life, and you know, an amazing life, a life where I love each day. I wake up happy. You know, life is something that I just took for granted. You know, so many times I didn't want life. I didn't want to see the next day, but you know, I wake up so grateful every day for life, and just not just life, but the life that I have, and you know, the people that love me, and you know, my surroundings are just, there's so much to be grateful for. My heart really goes out to anybody who is close to someone in addiction. I think about everything that I did to the people that I love, and my advice for them is just keep loving them. I think, you know, in those times when you want to give up, if you just know that one person still loves you, and you know, I know there were days where I would honestly just feel like overdosing, and I would just randomly get a message from a loved one, just all it was is I love you and I miss you, and that was enough just to yeah, see you get through another day. Well, that one was a lot. If I met someone struggling with some of the same things that I went through, I would, obviously my first thing would be the drugs aren't helping. That it may feel like, you know, the numbness helps, but it doesn't. Nothing's going to change unless you change it. Like, you need to actually be proactive about change. It's really hard to say what I would say to someone who's stuck in paranoia, because if you don't want to hear it, you won't. But I just hope that my story helps somebody else, you know, who is, you know, maybe it might reach somebody who is stuck in that, and, you know, that they can see that, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Because I know that when you're in the thick of it, you can't see that, and you don't think there's any way out. So that's why the cycle continues. But the cycle can be broken. You just need to do something different. I'm sad for my girls that I lost 4 years, but you know, I'm glad I didn't lose their whole life. It's never too late to just reach out and get help. It's hard to actually tell anyone who is stuck in addiction that, you know, there is a brighter side, but you know, things like my story could help someone see that there is. I don't think anyone actually had much hope left for me. Like, that's how gone I was. I didn't have much hope for me. Like, I couldn't see any way out. Like, death was all I longed for. I just longed to die because that was my way out. I never thought that I would even have half of what I have now. I never thought that I could actually think like a normal person and, you know, not be stressed out and anxious. And, you know, I never thought I could have a relationship with my kids, but it's never too late.